Hey everybody, how you doing? IntoWeapons back again with you. Got another video today for you on the upgrades that I'm making to the VEPR. This is the VEPR 762 by 54R with a 16.5-inch barrel. This is video number 11 out of the series that I'm doing on changing this from a hunting configuration to more of a battle type rifle. If you haven't seen my previous videos, jump out there and check those out. I do have a playlist on my channel that'll be able to run you right through all of them. Today we're going to be covering the replacement of the fire control group, or what people know as a trigger. We're going from the original Malott factory trigger and fire control group that's in this firearm, which is fine. It's definitely not a bad fire control group, but mainly because of 922R compliance, I've changed out a number of parts here. I'm pretty sure with my magazine that I have, which is US made, I'm pretty good on 922R. I haven't really gone through and counted the part numbers yet, but either way, I'm going to add this trigger component system, or the fire control group in here, which accounts as 3 parts: the disconnect, the sear, and the trigger itself. I got this from this replacement fire control group from Dinzag Arms. He does the Tapco G2 trigger and modifies it to be able to fit the VEPR rifle, and I'll show you a couple of the modifications that he makes to this. I purchased it off his website, and it ran me about $66.50. Real quickly, I did originally get one from him a couple weeks ago. It ended up being a different manufacturer. It wasn't a Tapco G2, mainly because of the lack of availability of Tapco G2 triggers. He had sent me, I believe, a BH manufactured trigger that was warped, I guess, from the heat process, so it did not work in this, and I have a video out there already that I'm sure some of you have watched on the issues that I was having of installing that. Well, anyway, real quickly, guys, to get to the point, I contacted Dinzag. He got back to me the very next day, said he would, he peeked at the video, he saw the issue, he said he would get me a new fire control group out right away. I think one was mailed to me within 2 days of that, and I got it 3 or 4 days after that. I reported the issue to him. So, A+ customer service from Dinzag Arms. He definitely knows how to take care of his customers, and he makes a very good product. So, ultimately that first trigger was warped just because of the heat process on there, and there's not a whole lot you can do to know about that before sending it out and actually putting it into an AK-47. So I really have nothing bad to say about Dinzag on that issue. Is like I said, A+ for his customer service for getting this resolved for me, though. So what I got in the package here today from Dinzag is his business card. And feel free to jump out there and check out some of the things he has available for VEPRs and Sagas. I guess Sagas is really his strong point there. I got the invoice, which we'll set aside. He sends you a couple fancy earplugs here. It's got some flames on it. Those are pretty cool. Set that aside. We got the bag that it comes in. And then it comes with these little black clips, and I don't know if you're even going to be able to see these, but you know what I think these are? I think when you do a trigger replacement or a conversion of some sort, you put these into the little holes that the rivets used to be in, and then melt the other side of them, and I think that covers or plugs the pinhole that you would have had in your conversion. But I could be completely wrong on that. I really have no idea. If someone knows and wants to let me know, put a comment down there. I'd certainly be interested in finding out. And then we got the bag with the actual fire control group in here. And to give you an idea of what it comes with here, we got some clips there that help retain the pins, which we're actually not going to use. We're going to use the original shepherd's hook in here, which is actually a retaining plate type shepherd's hook. That'll work just fine. And then you have the trigger, and you have the sear, or the disconnect, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And then the nice thing about the Tapco G2, and you can see it's actually labeled here, Tapco G2 on the trigger and on the sear here. The nice thing about the Tapco G2 is it comes with this little tube that you push through, and it holds all of this together, which is really nice. It makes reinstallation much easier. I really like that about the Tapco G2s. On here, what he had done is polished the underside of this hook, and I don't think you're going to be able to see that very good just because it's kind of a hard piece to see there, but it is polished for just a better, crisper trigger pull. And I think that's the only thing that's modified on here that I'm aware of, and I could be wrong on that. And then on the actual hammer itself, what he does is he has to cut a notch in right there, this little notch, a square notch, and that's for when it comes up, it hits the there's a kind of a pin, a support pin that runs in the receiver, and that needs to be cut out in order for it to be able to fully hit the firing pin. And then, as you can see, he rounds off and polishes the top of the hammer here as well as the one side where the hook connects to it, and resets it. So he does a really nice job here. It's polished really nice and clean. It's got a nice form and fit to it. Doesn't really mess around a whole lot with anything else. Still has the Tapco G2 stamp on the side there. I think you guys can see that. So overall, real nice, guys. He did a real nice job on that. $66.50 is a little bit more expensive than what you would normally pay for a fire control group, but not to have to do the modifications myself and spend the hours required to make sure that you're not taking too much off and that it's exactly what it needs to be. Well worth $66.50 in my book. So to kind of try to get this video on pace here, I'm sorry for talking so much, but we'll go ahead and set up a vise here. We'll stick the gun in there. We'll do a quick disassembly, and we'll get to the assembly and replacement of this fire control group. I'll show you how that's done. So let's get set up and do that. Alright guys, so before I started doing the disassembly, I thought I'd just show you what the original trigger pull is like, and maybe I can segment this in at the end as well. But so not too bad. It's got a nice trigger pull. It's got a little bit of creep here in the front that I'm not really liking. It's not the best. It's got, it's just kind of, it's gritty almost. That's what it feels like when you got that play in the initial here, that initial creep, and then it is a pretty nice trigger pull. I'd say probably maybe 5.5, 6 pounds. I could be a little bit off on that, but overall it's not a bad trigger pull. Just that gritty beginning, and then you kind of, you're resting into it. You have to squeeze quite a bit harder, and it does have a nice crisp trigger pull. So we'll show you the reset here. So it works, but definitely not the best trigger in the world. So we'll go ahead and see how that compares up to this Dinzag G2 replacement. Alright guys, here we go. I'm going to do my very best to keep everything in the camera shot for you. I originally watched a few tutorials online on how to replace a trigger. I did it a few times with the original trigger. This will probably be my 4th or 5th time replacing a trigger group or fire control group. So I may struggle along here a little bit, but ultimately there are a lot of great tutorials out there on how to disassemble and replace these. So what we're going to start off by doing is going ahead and releasing the hammer here, and what you can do is just give it a little bit of pressure and pull the trigger and release the tension off that. What we're going to do at this point then is I'm going to go ahead and remove the safety selector, and what you can do is just rotate it fully up 90-degree position and then pull that out. Not too difficult. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and pull these springs up, which is holding everything together, and pull those up over the hammer. And what I use to do that is just a hook, just like this here. And we'll go ahead and pull that up and over. My shepherd's hook's already kind of fallen out here. And then we'll get this one. I'm going to try to get my hands out of the shot here, guys. I apologize if you're not able to see a whole lot of everything here. Alright, so we got the springs up there. What I normally like to do, and this is recommended by a lot of people, is either use a rubber band, a twisty tie, or one of them plastic clips you can actually use too. Just anything really that you can wrap around here and keep this spring from jumping off this hammer, because that can definitely hurt when you're got this thing completely disassembled here. So once we got that kind of done, what we can do is we can remove our shepherd's hook. And for some of you who don't know, there are a couple different shepherd's hooks. This one is one of the retaining clip ones, and this makes it a lot easier to get in and out. As you can see, it just kind of pops in, pops out, holds the front pin, the back pin, and then the safety selector. But a lot of times this is actually just a kind of a clip. It looks kind of like a bent out of shape paper clip that holds all this in. A little bit more difficult to get out if you got the clip. Watch another tutorial on that if you have an issue on getting that out. But really you're just kind of pushing it backwards and off the pin, so it's not horribly difficult. Once you got that shepherd's hook out, you'll be able to remove the pins here. What I'm going to use is just a smaller punch. I'm not sure exactly what size this is. It would be 5/32, and that should be able to, these pins on at least this rifle is pretty loose. I don't even really need a hammer to push it through. I can just kind of push it, and we'll go ahead and push that through. You'll notice the pin itself has a the large end, that always needs to go in on the left hand side, go out and come in the same exact way. Your shepherd's hook will actually rest in this channel here on this pin, which is kind of holding everything together. So we're going to put that aside there. Now at that point, our hammer assembly should be able to come right out. I can just kind of twist it and pull it right out. And there you go. There's the hammer assembly. We'll set that aside. Then we can remove the other pin, which is holding in the trigger assembly here. And again, just pushing from right to left. We'll go ahead and push that through. And you can see again, pretty much the same type of pin. It's got that large end on there, which goes in from the left side. We'll set that aside. And then at that point, our whole trigger group should come right out. This Smolot trigger assembly here is held together by a retaining clip in here through this hole, which is holding everything together here. If you don't have that on a normal fire control group, your sear and your disconnect and all that will come springing out here because there is a spring loaded in there, and generally the only thing holding this together is the pin that runs through the receiver. So kind of keep that in mind if you're pulling this out of a standard AK and it might not have this retaining clip in here, I guess is what you'd call it. So as you can see, the hammer comes out as one assembly as well in this VEPR rifle, which makes it a lot easier, I tell you what. Alright, so to move on here, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking the spring off this current hammer and putting it on the new hammer. And the easiest way to do that is we'll go ahead and remove our... I'm hoping I'm going to get this in the camera, guys. I apologize if I'm up or down on you. Could probably zoom out a little bit maybe here, so I'm not totally off camera. Let me do that. There we go. Alright, so what I'm going to do is, without slapping my fingers here, which just kind of hurts, we're just going to release the spring here on each side of the hammer. And as you do that, you'll kind of take place of how it comes apart. You'll have the little pointy ends pointing downward, as well as the face of your hammer points downward. So you can get the orientation of how this kind of needs to go back together. So what we would do is take our new hammer, which is up here, and you can kind of just orient yourself that way. You can see it's just a replacement. We'll go ahead and remove our old hammer. And we'll replace it with this hammer. Again, hammer pointing down and the little pointers on the end of these springs pointing down. I did look into, I think it was J&E or JT or something like that, enhanced recoil spring here, or fire spring. I don't know what the heck they call this thing, but I heard there was a lot of issues with it. It doesn't allow you to hit the firing pin as hard as it needs to and stuff, so I decided just to stay with the original spring here. Once you got that in, what you can do is replace these springs on that hammer, just like we had it on the previous one. And again, using your rubber band, tying that down. There we go, that should hold everything in place. There we go, pretty simple. We'll set that aside down here in the box. At that point then what we're going to do is, as you can see, the Tapco G2 replacement here, again, it's being held together by this little tube, which is real nice, makes reinstallation a lot easier. As you can see, it's pretty much just a drop in. We're going to go ahead and drop it right down in here. Just make sure that it fits real well and that it's able to rock back and forth like it should. Some of the triggers that you can find, if your mag well here, or not the mag well, the trigger well, when they ground that out, maybe it's a little bit small, smaller than it originally is for the trigger, so you might have to file a little bit off the trigger, but this one seems like it rides pretty well in there, so we should be all set. Before we go ahead and repin that, what I'm actually going to do is put in the hammer, and what we can do is just kind of slide it back in like we took it out, and we'll go ahead and replace the pin that holds that in there, and again going from the left side of the receiver to the right side of the receiver. Hardest part is just finding the hole on the other side, making sure everything is lined up. There we go. Pins through, everything looks like it's sitting like it should. Then what we'll do is we'll go ahead and replace our front pin here with the fire control trigger. There we go, everything is in there, and it does look like it's rocking back and forth like it needs to be, which is good. What we'll do at this point then, I think, is we'll replace our shepherd's hook, which I put here. The shepherd's hook, and well, maybe I'll zoom in a little bit for you guys on this. I forgot it was zoomed out. The shepherd's hook, you just got to make sure that you're getting a solid fit on these pins as you're pushing them in. If you need to move the spring over off the hammer here just to get yourself in there, make sure you do that, because you definitely want this fully seated on that pin in the correct channel that it needs to be. If you don't have this thing fully seated and fully holding the pins like it needs to, when you're shooting, it could potentially come apart and your whole fire control group could come apart, causing some issues. And you certainly don't want that. So once we got the shepherd's hook back in there, or the retaining shepherd's hook, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and remove our rubber band here. And this is prior to me putting back in the safety selector, mainly because I don't know if the springs here will clear the safety selector as it goes across the receiver. I could be wrong, but this is just the way I'm doing it. We'll go ahead and pull this down and over the trigger group like we need it to be. Just like that. Everything comes together real nice. We'll replace our safety selector just by going in 90 degrees, like that. Making sure we get it in the hole of the shepherd's hook here on the inside, right there. We'll rotate downward into the fire position, and everything at that point should be good. We can go ahead and test the operation of it, and as you can see, it locked in nice, no issues there. Go ahead and pull the trigger. It releases nice, locks up nice, releases nice. Everything seems to be working pretty well. So I think we got ourselves a winner here. You just kind of have to hope, I guess, that it hits the hammer or the firing pin like it should. You kind of just have to play around with it at the range and make sure it's operating correctly at that point. But from a functionality standpoint, it's definitely looking like it's in place and ready to roll. So at this point, what we'll do is I'll put the gun back together off camera here so I'm not wasting time, and we'll check the trigger pull on it. Alright guys, so that was pretty simple. The installation of an AK-47 fire control group is definitely not difficult, and just by looking at it and playing around here, I think we got ourselves a winner for sure. We'll test the group here. As you can see, that hole, or maybe you can't, I don't know, I can definitely tell though, just so much cleaner and crisper. There isn't any kind of play initially when you first have it ready to go. There isn't any pullback, I mean, there's maybe a millimeter there of creep, and then you got an instant break. We'll go ahead and show the reset. Real nice and audible, and a real crisp break again. I mean, that's a crisp trigger. And I would have to say, it is probably, oh man, I'd say probably 3-4 pound pull. I don't know exactly, but that's kind of what it feels like to me. Overall, I'm really impressed with it. Dinzag did an awesome job with it. Glad it's a TAPCO G2, meets the 922R compliance. It's a heck of an improvement over the original Malott factory trigger they have in here, so my 100% recommendation on a Dinzag Arms fire control group replacement for the VEPR. If you guys have any questions, feel free to let me know. Otherwise, I appreciate you watching, and as always, until next time, take it easy.